At midnight, I caught my son deleting every photo of me. Some secrets are too heavy for a mother's heart to carry. Those words escaped my lips in a whisper as I stood frozen in the hallway, watching my 17-year-old son methodically delete photo after photo of me from his phone. The blue glow of his screen illuminated his face in the darkness of his room, and with each swipe, each tap, another memory of us together vanished into digital oblivion. I'm Cordelia Ashworth, and I thought I knew my son better than anyone in this world. I was wrong. It was 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October when my life tilted off its axis. I'd gotten up for my usual midnight glass of water, a habit I'd developed since my divorce 2 years ago when sleep became as elusive as my ex-husband's honesty. The house was supposed to be silent, wrapped in that particular stillness that only comes after midnight when the world holds its breath. But there was a light coming from under Jasper's door. My first instinct was maternal concern. Was he sick? Having trouble sleeping? I approached his door with the quiet footsteps I'd perfected over years of checking on him as a child, ready to peek in and make sure he was all right. Through the crack in his door, I saw him sitting cross-legged on his bed, hunched over his phone with an intensity that made my stomach clench. At first, I thought he might be texting a girl. 17-year-old boys and their mysterious midnight conversations were nothing new. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness and I could see his screen more clearly, my blood turned to ice. He was in his photo gallery, and he was deleting pictures of me. Not just any pictures. Every single one. I watched paralyzed as he swiped past a photo from his last birthday. The one where I'd surprised him with tickets to see his favorite band. Delete. A picture from our camping trip last summer where we'd built a fire together and talked until dawn about his college dreams. Delete. The selfie we'd taken just last week when I'd picked him up from school, both of us laughing at something ridiculous he'd said. Delete. Each deletion felt like a physical blow. My hand flew to my chest as if I could somehow catch my heart before it shattered completely. This was my son. The boy I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through countless sick days, cheered for at every soccer game and school play. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tell me I was the bravest person he knew. And he was systematically erasing me from his digital life. I must have made some sound, a gasp, a whimper, something, because his head snapped up and our eyes met through the crack in the door. For a moment that stretched like eternity, we just stared at each other. His face cycled through a dozen emotions. Surprise, guilt, defiance, and something else I couldn't quite name. Fear maybe. Or shame. Mom! His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. I pushed the door open slowly, my legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. Jasper, what are you doing? He clutched his phone to his chest as if protecting it from me, and the gesture wounded me more than any harsh words could have. When had I become someone he needed to hide from? It's not what it looks like, he said, but we both knew that was a lie. It was exactly what it looked like, and we both knew it. I stepped into his room, noting how he seemed to shrink back against his headboard. The space that had once been filled with our easy conversations and shared jokes now felt charged with tension and unspoken truths. Then explain it to me, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded when everything inside me was crumbling. Help me understand why you're deleting every photo of me from your phone at nearly 1 a.m. Jasper looked down at his phone, then back at me, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too difficult to swallow. In the dim light from his phone screen, he looked younger than his 17 years, but also older somehow, burdened by something I couldn't fathom. You wouldn't understand, he finally said. Try me. I moved closer, settling carefully on the edge of his bed like I might with a wounded animal. Slowly, non-threateningly. Jasper, I'm your mother. There's nothing you can't tell me. He laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor. That's just it, Mom. You're my mother. And that's the problem. The words hit me like a physical slap. I felt my face burn and my eyes water, but I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice level. What does that mean? For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him, he said, "The other kids at school. They've been asking questions. About you." My heart clenched. What kind of questions? About why Dad left. About what you did to make him go. His voice was gaining strength now, but each word felt like a nail in my coffin. "They've been saying things, Mom. Cruel things. And when they see pictures of us together on my social media, it just gives them more ammunition." I felt like I was drowning. The divorce had been hard enough on Jasper, but I thought we'd worked through it. His father had left us for his secretary. A cliché so painful it was almost laughable, but I tried to shield Jasper from the worst of it. Apparently, I hadn't succeeded. "What kinds of things are they saying?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jasper's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I saw my little boy again, the one who used to run to me when kids at school were mean to him. But this time the cruelty was about me, and he was running away. "They say you're a crazy ex-wife who drove Dad away with your controlling behavior. They say that's why he left, why he moved across the country. They say." He paused, swallowing hard. "They say you're probably the reason I'm so weird and antisocial." Each word was a dagger, but I forced myself to remain calm. "And you believe them?" "No." The word exploded from him, then he seemed to deflate. "I don't know. Maybe. Sometimes." I reached out to touch his arm, but he flinched away, and the rejection felt like a physical blow. When had my touch become unwelcome? When had I become someone he needed to protect himself from? "Jasper, your father left because he made a choice. It had nothing to do with you being weird or antisocial. Which you're not, by the way. You're thoughtful and intelligent and kind. Those kids are just what, Mom? Telling the truth." His voice rose, and I could hear years of suppressed frustration bubbling up. "Maybe Dad did have good reasons for leaving. Maybe you are controlling. Maybe you do drive people away." The accusations hung in the air between us like smoke. I felt something inside me break. Not just crack, but actually shatter into pieces so small I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to put them back together. "Is that what you really think of me?" I whispered. He looked at his phone again, at the screen still glowing with deleted memories of our life together. "I don't know what to think anymore. All I know is that having pictures of us together on my phone makes everything harder at school. Kids screenshot them and pass them around, making jokes about you, about us. They call you my crazy mom, and say I'm going to end up just like you. So you decided to erase me." "I decided to survive high school." The words came out louder than he'd intended, and he glanced toward the door nervously. "Do you know what it's like to have everyone at school talking about your family? To have kids you barely know coming up to you in the hallway, asking if it's true that your mom stalked your dad on Facebook after he left? To have them showing you screenshots of your parents' divorce proceedings that somehow got leaked online?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "What divorce proceedings?" "Someone's parent works at the courthouse. They got copies of the filing documents and posted them in the school's anonymous confession page. Everyone knows about Dad's affair now, about how you tried to get the house, about the fights over custody." His voice broke slightly. "Everyone knows everything, Mom. And they all think it's your fault." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. The divorce had been public record, of course, but I never imagined that the private details of our family's dissolution would become entertainment for high school students. The humiliation was overwhelming, but what hurt more was realizing that Jasper had been dealing with this alone. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Yes. Because what would you have done? Gone to the school? Made it even worse?" He shook his head. "I just wanted it to go away. I thought if I didn't have any pictures of us together on my phone, maybe people would stop connecting me to all the drama. So you were going to pretend I don't exist. I was going to protect both of us." His voice cracked with emotion. "Do you think I wanted to delete those pictures? Do you think it didn't hurt me to watch our memories disappear one by one?" I looked at his face. Really looked, and saw the tears he was trying so hard to hold back. This wasn't the cold, calculating rejection, I'd initially thought. This was a scared 17-year-old boy trying to navigate an impossible situation. "Show me," I said quietly. "What?" "Show me what they're saying. What they're posting. I want to see it." Jasper hesitated, then reluctantly unlocked his phone and navigated to what looked like an anonymous social media page. My heart sank as I saw post after post about our family, most of them cruel and many of them completely false. There were edited photos of me with nasty captions, fake quotes attributed to me, and endless speculation about why my marriage had fallen apart. But the worst part was reading the comments from kids I'd known since they were children. Kids I'd driven to soccer practice and made snacks for at birthday parties. As they dissected my life and found me wanting. "Oh, Jasper," I breathed. "I had no idea. It started right after Dad moved away," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "At first it was just a few people making jokes, but then it snowballed. Someone created a whole thread dedicated to analyzing our family drama. They call it the Ashworth Files." I handed him back his phone, my hands shaking slightly. "Why didn't you block them? Report the posts?" "I tried. But they keep making new accounts and the posts keep getting shared. And even when I don't look, other kids make sure to tell me about new posts. It's like I can't escape it." He looked at me with eyes that seemed far too old for his 17 years. "I can't escape you, Mom. Even when I want to." The words cut deep, but I could see the pain behind them. This wasn't malice. This was survival instinct. A child trying to protect himself the only way he knew how. "Is that why you've been so distant lately?" "Yes." "Why you don't want me picking you up from school anymore? Why you avoid being seen with me in public?" He nodded miserably. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know it's not fair to you, but I can't handle the attention anymore. Every time someone sees us together, it becomes new material for their posts." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't about my hurt feelings. This was about my son's well-being. "What can I do to help?" "I don't know if you can do anything," he said. "Maybe if you just kept a lower profile, didn't post about us on your social media, didn't come to school events where people might see us together." Each suggestion felt like another small death, but I could see the hope in his eyes. Hope that maybe we could find a way through this that would allow him to have a normal senior year. "You want me to make myself invisible," I said, not as an accusation but as a statement of fact. "Not invisible. Just less visible. Until I graduate and go to college and all this dies down." I looked around his room at the photos on his dresser and walls. Photos that still included me, at least for now. "And if it doesn't die down, what then?" "I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our conversation settling around us like dust. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of a car passing by. Normal people living normal lives without having to worry about becoming social media pariahs. "I need you to know something," I said finally. "Your father didn't leave because of anything you did, and he didn't leave because I'm controlling or crazy. He left because he fell in love with someone else and was too much of a coward to handle his responsibilities to his family. That's not your fault, and it's not mine either. It's his choice and his alone." Jasper nodded, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't entirely convinced. "And I need you to know that I would do anything to protect you from this kind of pain. If making myself less visible is what you need right now, then that's what I'll do. But I won't disappear completely, and I won't let you erase our relationship just because some kids at school are cruel." "What do you mean?" I reached over and took his phone from his hands before he could protest. With deliberate movements, I navigated to his recently deleted folder and began restoring the photos he'd removed. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm saving our memories," I said, my voice firm despite the tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. "You don't have to post these pictures or show them to anyone, but you're not deleting them. These moments we've shared. They're real, they matter, and they're worth preserving." He watched as photo after photo reappeared in his gallery. The camping trip. his birthday, our silly selfies. All of it coming back to life with a few taps of my finger. But what about school? What about the posts and the comments? We'll figure it out, I said. Maybe we need to talk to the school administration about the bullying. Maybe we need to consider changing schools for your senior year. Maybe we need to get a lawyer involved if this keeps escalating. But what we're not going to do is pretend our relationship doesn't exist. Jasper was quiet for a long moment, looking at his phone screen where our faces smiled back at us from a dozen different memories. I'm scared, Mom. I know, baby. I'm scared too. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to spend my entire senior year being miserable. I pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in months, he didn't pull away. He felt smaller in my arms than I remembered, more fragile, and I realized how much this situation had been weighing on him. You're not going to lose me, I whispered into his hair. We're going to get through this together, okay? But no more midnight photo deletions. No more trying to erase our history. Okay, he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. And Jasper, next time something like this happens, next time kids at school are being cruel or you're feeling overwhelmed, you come to me first. We face it together. That's what families do. Even broken families like ours. I pulled back to look at him, cupping his face in my hands. Especially broken families like ours. We might be cracked, but we're not shattered. Not if we don't let them break us. He nodded, and I could see some of the tension leaving his shoulders. We talked for another hour, sitting there in his room in the middle of the night, making plans for how to handle the situation at school. We decided to schedule a meeting with his guidance counselor, to document the harassment in case we needed to take legal action, and to consider whether he might benefit from talking to a therapist about everything he'd been dealing with. But more importantly, we talked about us, about our relationship and how to protect it while still acknowledging the reality of his social situation. We agreed that I would be more mindful about public displays of our family life, but that our private relationship would remain unchanged. No more hiding, no more shame, no more pretending I didn't exist. As I finally got up to leave his room, Jasper called out to me. Mom. Yeah. I'm sorry about deleting the photos. And I'm sorry I've been such a jerk to you lately. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. You haven't been a jerk. You've been a scared kid dealing with an impossible situation. There's a difference. I love you, you know. Even when it's complicated. I love you too, Jasper. Always. As I walked back to my room, I thought about how much can change in a single midnight conversation. A few hours ago, I'd been convinced my son was rejecting me, trying to erase me from his life. Now I understood that he'd been trying to protect both of us the only way he knew how. The situation at school was still there, waiting for us to face it in the morning. The cruel posts and comments hadn't disappeared. The public humiliation of our family's private struggles was still a reality we'd have to navigate. But we would do it together as a family, however broken and imperfect we might be. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, thinking about everything Jasper had told me. The idea that my divorce had become entertainment for high school students was nauseating, but what bothered me more was that I'd been so wrapped up in my own pain that I'd failed to see how much my son was suffering. The divorce had been brutal. My ex-husband Richard had indeed left me for his secretary, a woman barely older than Jasper. The proceedings had been contentious, with him fighting me on everything from custody to property division. I'd been hurt and angry, and I probably had posted more on social media than I should have during that time. I'd needed an outlet for my pain, and Facebook had seemed like a safe space to share my feelings with friends and family. I'd never considered that screenshots of my posts might make their way into the hands of high school students, or that my son would become collateral damage in my very public processing of grief. The guilt was overwhelming. In trying to heal from my own wounds, I'd inadvertently opened new ones in my child. But guilt wasn't going to solve anything. What mattered now was moving forward, protecting Jasper, and rebuilding the relationship that had become strained under the weight of circumstances neither of us had fully understood. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research. I learned about cyberbullying laws in our state, documented the harassment Jasper had been experiencing, and reached out to the school district about their policies on student conduct both online and offline. What I found was disturbing. The anonymous nature of many of these posts made it difficult to hold specific students accountable, and the school's jurisdiction over off-campus social media activity was limited. But I also found resources. There were lawyers who specialized in online harassment cases. There were therapists who worked specifically with families dealing with social media bullying. There were even organizations dedicated to helping people rebuild their online reputations after public scandals or divorces. Most importantly, I found my voice again. I'd been hiding from the situation, hoping it would resolve itself, letting shame keep me silent about what we were going through. But silence hadn't protected us. It had only allowed the problem to fester and grow. So I started speaking up. I contacted the parents of the students I could identify as being involved in the harassment. Some were horrified to learn what their children were doing and immediately took action. Others were defensive, dismissive, or claimed it was just kids being kids. But at least they knew that someone was watching, that there would be consequences if the behavior continued. I worked with the school administration to implement new policies about online harassment between students. While they couldn't control what happened on social media platforms, they could address how those online interactions affected the school environment. I also started going to therapy myself, not just to process my divorce but to learn better strategies for supporting Jasper through this ordeal. I learned about digital citizenship, about helping teenagers navigate online social dynamics, and about the long-term psychological effects of public humiliation during adolescence. But perhaps most importantly, I learned about forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it. Jasper and I started having weekly check-ins where we'd sit down and talk openly about how he was feeling, what challenges he was facing at school, and how our family dynamic was evolving. Some weeks were harder than others. There were setbacks. New posts would appear, or someone would bring up our family drama in a class discussion, or Jasper would have a particularly bad day and temporarily revert to wanting to distance himself from me. But we kept talking. We kept working through it together. Slowly, things began to improve. The anonymous posts became less frequent as the novelty wore off and the school year progressed. Some students who had participated in the harassment issued genuine apologies. Others simply moved on to new targets, which was heartbreaking but at least meant the focus was off our family. Jasper started standing up for himself more, calling out cruel comments when he heard them instead of just enduring them silently. He joined the school's peer mediation program and began advocating for other students who were experiencing bullying. And our relationship began to heal. It wasn't quick or easy. Trust, once damaged, takes time to rebuild. There were moments when I wondered if we'd ever get back to the easy closeness we'd shared before the divorce, and its aftermath changed everything. But gradually, I began to see glimpses of my son again. He started asking me to drive him to school occasionally. He'd show me funny memes on his phone instead of quickly hiding the screen when I walked by. He even posted a photo of us together on his Instagram for the first time in over a year. A simple picture from a weekend hiking trip with a caption that just said, "Good day with Mom." The comments on that post were largely positive, which surprised both of us. It seemed that most of his classmates had moved on from our family drama, and those who hadn't were vastly outnumbered by friends who were just happy to see Jasper looking happy. As his senior year progressed and college acceptance letters started arriving, Jasper began talking about our future differently. Instead of viewing graduation as an escape from our relationship, he started making plans that included me. He wanted me at his graduation ceremony. He asked me to help him shop for dorm room supplies. He even suggested we take a mother-son trip together before he left for college. The night before his graduation, we found ourselves back in his room, looking through photos on his phone. But this time, instead of deleting our memories, we were adding to them, taking new pictures to commemorate the end of this chapter and the beginning of the next. "I'm proud of us," he said as we scrolled through years of photos together. Yeah. We could have let all that drama destroy our relationship, but we didn't. We fought for each other instead. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, But they were happy tears this time. We did fight for each other, didn't we? And we won. He grinned at me, that same mischievous smile I'd been seeing since he was a toddler. Sorry it took me so long to figure out that you were worth fighting for. Oh, you knew I was worth fighting for, I said, playfully shoving his shoulder. You were just scared. And that's okay. Being scared is normal. What matters is that you didn't let the fear win in the end. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I never want to go through anything like that again. Feeling like I had to choose between having a relationship with you and having a normal social life at school. Hopefully you won't have to. But if you ever find yourself in a situation like that again, whether it's in college or in your adult life, I want you to remember what we learned this year. What's that? That hiding from the problem doesn't make it go away. That shame is just another form of prison. And that the people who really matter will stand by you even when things get messy. He nodded thoughtfully. And that it's better to face difficult things together than to face them alone. Exactly. As we said goodnight and I headed back to my room, I reflected on how much we'd both grown over the past year. The midnight discovery that had initially felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something better. A deeper, more honest relationship built on mutual respect and genuine communication rather than just biological connection. The cruel posts and comments had been painful, but they'd also forced us to examine our family dynamic and make conscious choices about what kind of relationship we wanted to have. Without that crisis, we might have continued drifting apart without ever addressing the underlying issues. I thought about that night in October when I'd found Jasper deleting photos of me. How devastated and rejected I'd felt. I'd interpreted his actions through the lens of my own insecurities and fears, assuming he was rejecting me when he was actually trying to protect both of us. It had taken time for me to understand that his behavior wasn't about me at all. It was about a 17-year-old boy trying to survive high school with his dignity intact. Once I could see the situation from his perspective, everything changed. We'd learned to communicate openly about difficult topics. We'd learned to ask for help when we needed it instead of suffering in silence. We'd learned that our family's imperfections didn't make us broken. They made us human. And perhaps most importantly, we'd learned that love is stronger than shame, that connection is worth fighting for, and that even the darkest midnight can lead to a brighter dawn. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about all the photos on Jasper's phone. The ones he'd tried to delete and the new ones we'd taken together. Each image told part of our story, captured moments of joy and struggle and growth and love. Those photos were more than just digital files. They were proof that we'd chosen each other again and again, even when it was hard. They were evidence that our relationship had not only survived its greatest test but had emerged stronger than before. And tomorrow, as Jasper walked across that graduation stage, I'd be in the audience with my camera ready, adding one more precious memory to our collection. This time I knew he'd be happy to have his picture taken with his mom. The boy who had once tried to erase me from his digital life now wanted me prominently featured in his most important moments. It had been a long journey from that midnight discovery to this place of renewed connection, but every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable truth, every moment of vulnerability had been worth it. We were no longer the same mother and son who had faced each other across his darkened room that October night. We were wiser, more honest, more intentional about our relationship. We'd learned that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day, especially when circumstances make that choice challenging. And we'd chosen each other. Despite everything. Because of everything. That midnight when I caught my son deleting every photo of me had felt like the end of our story. Instead, it had been the beginning of our best chapter yet. The months that followed Jasper's graduation were a testament to how much our relationship had evolved. As he prepared for college, we found ourselves in a completely different place than we'd been just a year earlier. Where once there had been secrecy and shame, now there was openness and pride. Jasper chose a university 3 hours away. Close enough for regular visits but far enough to give him the independence he craved. During the summer before his departure, we spent countless hours together. Not because we had to but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We took that mother-son trip we talked about. A week-long road trip to visit colleges and explore new cities. Along the way, Jasper opened up about his fears and excitement about starting this new chapter. He also shared something that surprised me. He'd been documenting our healing journey in a private journal, and he was considering writing about it for his college application essays. "I want to write about what I learned from our family's public breakdown," he told me as we sat in a diner somewhere in Colorado, sharing a plate of fries. "About how sometimes the worst things that happen to you can teach you the most important lessons about what really matters." "What did you learn?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear his perspective. "That reputation is temporary, but relationships are forever, if you're willing to fight for them. That being ashamed of your family is actually being ashamed of yourself. And that sometimes protecting someone means standing up to the world with them, not hiding from the world without them." His words brought tears to my eyes. This was my son. Not the scared boy who'd been deleting photos in the dark, but a young man who'd grown from his struggles and found wisdom in his pain. The college application process became something we tackled together. I helped him brainstorm essay topics, proofread his drafts, and manage deadlines. He included photos of us together in his application portfolios when schools requested them, no longer afraid of being associated with me publicly. When acceptance letters started arriving, Jasper's excitement was infectious. He'd gotten into several excellent schools, including his top choice. But what made me proudest wasn't his academic achievement. It was watching him share the news with confidence and joy, no longer burdened by the weight of family shame. The night before he left for college, we had one final conversation in his room. But this time, instead of discovering him in crisis, I found him carefully packing printed photos of our family, including many from that collection he'd once tried to delete. "These are for my dorm room," he explained, showing me the small album he'd created. "I want pictures of home where I can see them every day. Even pictures of me," I teased, though my heart was full. "Especially pictures of you," he said seriously. "I want my roommates and new friends to know that I come from a family that loves each other enough to fight through the hard times together." As I helped him finish packing, we talked about everything and nothing. His class schedule, his roommate, whether he remembered to pack enough socks. Normal mother-son conversations that had once seemed impossible. "I'm going to miss you," I told him as we taped up the last box. "I'm going to miss you too." "But Mom." "Yeah. I'm not going to miss the person I was this time last year. That scared kid who thought he had to choose between his family and his social life. You were doing the best you could with an impossible situation. Maybe. But I'm glad that version of our story is over. I like this version better, where we're a team." The next morning, as we loaded up the car for the drive to his campus, I thought about how different this moment felt from what I'd imagined a year ago. Then, I'd feared that Jasper's departure for college would be an escape from our relationship. Now, I knew it was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where our bond was strong enough to survive distance and change. The drive to campus was filled with music, laughter, and easy conversation. When we arrived and began moving his belongings into his dorm room, other families were doing the same thing. But unlike the previous year, when I would have worried about being judged or recognized, I simply enjoyed the moment. Jasper introduced me to his roommate and the boys' parents with genuine warmth. "This is my mom, Cordelia," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "She's pretty amazing." As the day wore on and it came time for me to leave, I felt the expected sadness of any parent dropping their child off at college. But underneath that natural grief was something stronger. Gratitude for the relationship we'd built and confidence in its ability to endure. "Thank you," Jasper said as we hugged goodbye in the parking lot. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For fighting for our relationship even when I was too scared to fight for it myself. For showing me that love is stronger than shame." "Thank you for letting me back in," I replied. "For choosing to trust me with your fears and your future." As I drove home alone, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. That midnight discovery in October had felt like the end of everything. Now I could see it for what it really was. The moment when we stopped taking our relationship for granted and started actively working to build something stronger. The house felt quiet without Jasper, but it wasn't the hollow emptiness I'd expected. Instead, it felt like a peaceful pause before the next phase of our lives. I knew he'd call soon and visit often, and that our relationship would continue to evolve as he grew into adulthood. That evening, I posted a photo on social media. A picture of Jasper and me taken that morning at his dorm. The caption was simple: "Proud of this young man and the incredible journey we've been on together. College, here he comes." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Friends and family members commented with congratulations and heart emojis. A few people even mentioned how much they admired our family's resilience through difficult times. But the comment that meant the most came from Jasper himself, posted from his new dorm room. "Love you, Mom. Thanks for never letting me disappear you from my life, even when I thought I wanted to." Reading those words, I thought about that terrified boy I'd found deleting photos in the dark. He'd been trying to protect us both the only way he knew how, but he'd been operating from a place of fear and shame. Now, barely a year later, he was publicly celebrating our relationship and the growth we'd experienced together. The transformation hadn't been magic. It had been the result of countless difficult conversations, professional help, intentional choices, and the daily decision to keep showing up for each other even when it was hard. We'd learned that love isn't just a feeling you have for someone. It's a commitment you make to keep choosing them, especially when external circumstances make that choice challenging. As I settled into my empty nest, I made plans for this new phase of life. I wanted to continue the advocacy work I'd started around cyberbullying and social media harassment. Too many families were suffering in silence, just as we had, and I'd learned that speaking up could make a difference. I also wanted to focus on my own growth and healing. The divorce and its aftermath had wounded me in ways I was still discovering, and I knew that becoming the healthiest version of myself would benefit not just me but also my ongoing relationship with Jasper. But most importantly, I wanted to remember the lessons this experience had taught me. That shame thrives in darkness but withers in the light. That our worst moments don't define us. Our response to them does. That relationships worth having are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. The weeks passed, and Jasper settled into college life with an ease that delighted me. Our regular phone calls were filled with stories about his classes, his friends, and his adventures in independence. He seemed genuinely happy. Not the forced cheerfulness of someone trying to convince themselves they're fine, but the authentic joy of a young person discovering who they're meant to become. When he came home for Thanksgiving break, the reunion was everything I'd hoped for. He bounced through the door with energy and excitement, eager to share everything he'd experienced. But more than that, he seemed comfortable in his own skin in a way he hadn't been for years. "College is amazing, Mom," he told me as we prepared dinner together. "But you know what the best part is?" "What's that?" "I'm not afraid to be myself anymore. I'm not worried about what people think of my family or my background. I just am who I am, and that's enough." As we sat around the table that Thanksgiving, just the two of us, I felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. The painful path through public humiliation and family crisis had led us to a deeper, more authentic relationship than we'd ever had before. "I have something for you," Jasper said after dinner, pulling out a small wrapped package. Inside was a photo album. Not digital, but actual printed photographs arranged with care. The first page showed pictures from his childhood, but as I flipped through, I saw images from our recent adventures, screenshots of our text conversations, and even some of the photos he'd once tried to delete. On the last page was a letter he'd written. "Mom, this album represents our whole story. Not just the pretty parts but the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of our relationship. I never want to forget where we've been or take for granted where we are now. You taught me that love means showing up, especially when it's hard. Thank you for always showing up for me, even when I couldn't show up for myself. Love you, Jasper." Reading his words, I was reminded once again that some of life's greatest gifts come disguised as its greatest challenges. That midnight when I found my son trying to erase me from his digital life had seemed like a devastating betrayal. Instead, it had been the catalyst for the most important work we'd ever done together. The work of building a relationship strong enough to weather any storm. As Jasper headed back to school after the holiday break, I knew our story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new growth, new discoveries about ourselves and each other. But I also knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together, as a family that had learned to fight for love instead of running from difficulty. The boy who had once hidden in shame was now a young man who wore his family connections with pride. The mother who had once feared losing her son had learned that true love doesn't cling but creates space for growth. And together, we discovered that the strongest relationships aren't the ones that never face adversity. They're the ones that use adversity as an opportunity to become something even better. That midnight discovery had felt like an ending. It turned out to be the beginning of everything beautiful that came after. Thank you for watching. If you want more videos like this, please like, subscribe and share.